ओम श्री परमात्मने नमः। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं तत्तो जयमुदीरयेत्। श्रीमद्भगवद्गीता साधका संजीवनी 14th chapter 3 modes of material nature verses 5 to 18. Description of the 3 modes of nature. In the next verse, the Lord explains how the gunas, modes of nature, evolved from Prakriti bind the spirit. Verse 5. Sattvam rajastama iti gunaha prakriti sambhavaha nibadhananti mahabaho dehe dehinam avayam. Sattva, Raja and Tama. These gunas, born of Prakriti, bind the imperishable spirit to the body. O mighty armed. Comment. The 3 gunas, Sattva, Raja and Tama, are born of Prakriti. These gunas, attributes or qualities, out of which infinite universes evolve and innumerable beings, diverse in character, are born, are neither more nor less than 3 in number. These 3 gunas bind the imperishable spirit to the body. The fact is that these gunas don't bind the spirit, but it is the spirit which is bound by assuming its affinity with the gunas and their evolutes, that is, objects, wealth, family and body, etc. The spirit identifies itself with the body and is attached to other persons and wealth, etc. So, in spite of being imperishable, it regards the diseases and death of the body as its own, and also the loss of other persons and wealth, etc. as its own. With the sense of I and mine in the body, these 3 gunas bind the soul in the body. In the absence of the sense of I and mine, it is only the Lord. An important fact. The spirit assumes its affinity with the body in 2 ways. 1. I am the body, the sense of egoism. 2. The body is mine, the sense of mineness. Thus, the spirit, by having the connection of egoism and the sense of mine, is bound by the 3 gunas. As a married person has relationship with all the members of the family of his wife and regards her necessity as his own, the spirit, having assumed its affinity with the body, regards the latter's necessity as its own. Moreover, in spite of being imperishable, it is afraid of death and has a desire to live. If it renounces its affinity with the body, it will have no desire to live, nor will be afraid of death. Therefore, so long as it has a desire to live and is afraid of death, it means that it is bound by the gunas. The spirit is uniform and imperishable, while the body, being kaleidoscopic and perishable, is decaying every moment. So, if a striver does not attach importance to what is decaying and perishing every moment, he will realize the imperishable self which transcends the 3 gunas automatically. Now, in the next verse, the Lord explains the essential character of sattva and the way in which it binds the spirit. Verse 6. Tatra sattvam nirmalatvat prakashkam anamyam sukha sangena badnati jnana sangena chanagha. Of these, sattva, being stainless, is illuminating and flawless. It binds, O sinless one, by creating attachment to happiness and to knowledge. Comment. Sattva, being stainless, is illuminating and free from morbidity of any kind. As in the light, all the objects are clearly seen. With the predominance of sattva guna, all the propensities of rajaguna and tamaguna are clearly seen. Desire, anger, greed, pride and envy, etc., which evolve from rajaguna and tamaguna, are clearly seen in that light. With the predominance of the quality of sattva, the senses become animated and the mind works more promptly in understanding the mundane as well as the spiritual topics. The quality of sattva, mode of goodness, can be divided into two parts. First, pure sattva, second, impure sattva. The former aims at God realization, while the latter aims at mundane pleasures and prosperity. With the predominance of the mode of pure sattva, a striver having the aim of God realization has a natural inclination for spiritual progress, while a person possessing the mode of impure sattva hankers after worldly pleasures and prosperity, which lead him to bondage. Having this mode, scientists make inventions, but having no aim for God realization because of their pride of success and desire for praise and money, etc., are bound. In fact, the quality of sattva is not totally flawless, but it is more flawless than either the rajaguna or the tamaguna. Either the Lord or the self is totally flawless, but the sattva guna has been called flawless because it is conducive to God realization. Due to the predominance of sattva, a striver experiences joy and peace. He is attached to the joy and peace and he does not want to be deprived of them. This attachment leads him to bondage. During this period, his faculty of knowledge develops. He comes to know several wonderful facts and topics never known before. So he is attached to this knowledge and he has a desire to maintain it forever. This attachment is the cause of bondage. Moreover, his pride of his superiority that he knows more than others also leads him to bondage. Thus, he can't transcend the three gunas. This attachment is the quality of raja which binds the striver. If the striver is not attached to the joy and knowledge, he transcends the three gunas, including the sattva guna, and realizes the self. The striver should not enjoy that joy and knowledge, nor should he aim at them. He should think that they are conducive to the attainment of his goal. Moreover, he has to attain that goal which is the eliminator of pleasure and knowledge. Knowledge and pleasure are mental projections during the preponderance of sattva. They wax and wane, they come and go, while the self remains uniform and constant. It knows no increase or decrease. Therefore, a striver should remain quite unconcerned and indifferent to these modifications. He should not enjoy them. Thus, he will not get entangled in pleasure and knowledge. In the next verse, the Lord describes the characteristic of Rajaguna and shows how it binds the spirit. Verse 7. Rajo ragatmakam vedhi trishna sanga samudbhavam tan nibadhanati kantya karma sangena dehinam. No rajas to be of nature of passion, the source of longing and attachment. It binds the spirit through attachment to actions. O son of Kunti. Comment. This quality of rajas manifests itself in the form of passion or attachment to persons, things and actions, etc. The rajaguna binds the spirit through attachment to actions. With the predominance of rajaguna, there is enhancement of desire and attachment, which conduce a man to perform actions. When he starts those actions, he is more and more entangled in their thought as well as the thought of new actions. Thus, a man does not get an opportunity to attain salvation. He, because of desire and attachment for actions, is bound and follows the cycle of birth and death. So, a striver should perform actions without having a desire for their fruit according to the circumstances available, but should not begin new actions for prosperity and pleasure. A man is also bound when he has a desire to enjoy the fruit of actions. Thus, a man is bound by attachment to actions and the fruit of actions. In order to be free from this attachment, a striver should always think of the kaleidoscopic nature of all the persons, things, incidents, and circumstances, etc. All of them are decaying and dying every moment. Even the kings and emperors, with all their luxuries, such as riches, palaces, and attendants, etc., have met the same fate. He should think that he is going to meet the same fate. So he should not waste his energy, intellect, and time by having attachment for actions and their fruit. This attachment will lead him to the cycle of birth and death, and he will be deprived of the real attainment of human life. Therefore, instead of performing new actions for prosperity and pleasure, he should perform his prescribed duty according to the available circumstances without having any attachment for it. Such thoughts conduce a striver to detachment from actions. In the next verse, the Lord describes the characteristic of Tamaguna and the way in which it binds the spirit. Verse 8. Tamastva ajnanacham vedhi mohanam sarvadehinam parmadalasya nidrabhis tannibadhanati bharta. But no tamsa, mode of darkness or ignorance, to be born of ignorance, deluding all embodied beings. It binds the spirit, O Bharata, through heedlessness, indolence, and sleep. Comment. It is born of ignorance or folly, and it deludes the embodied beings, that is, those beings who regard the body as their self. It enshrouds discrimination, and so they can't discriminate between the real and the unreal, and the proper and the improper. It spoils even Rajasika pleasures and prosperity. Then there is no question of the safety of Sattvika happiness. The Tamaguna binds the embodied beings through heedlessness, indolence, and sleep. Heedlessness is of two kinds. First, the heedlessness by which one does not discharge one's duty, which is conducive to one's own welfare as well as to the welfare of others. Second, the heedlessness by which one performs futile actions which are of no use either to him or to others. Futile actions can further be divided into two categories. First, extravagance on smoking, drinking, and movies, etc. Second, playing cards, etc., shooting birds and bees, etc., and destroying plants, etc. Indolence is also of two kinds. First, in this state of indolence, a man remains idle, sleeps more than is required, and ever postpones the work. This indolence leads a man to bondage. Second, in the second kind of indolence, a person feels drowsy after the day's hard mental and physical work. That sort of sleep is inevitable. This indolence is not defective. Sleep can also be divided into two parts. First, sleep which is necessary for a healthy body and a healthy mind. It is regulated and is helpful in the practice of yoga. Unnecessary sleep, one sleeps too much. It is a stumbling block to the practice of yoga, and so it is to be neglected. Thus, Tamaguna binds a man through heedlessness, indolence, and sleep, etc. They are stumbling blocks to his mundane and spiritual progress. An important fact: the three gunas are the evolutes of Prakriti, and he, the self, is free from nature and its modes, but he is bound because of his contact with these modes. So, if he realizes the fact, he is free from them. In the next verse, the Lord describes the natural function of the three gunas, modes, before they bind the spirit. Verse 9. Sattvam sukhe sanjati rajaha karmani bharta jnanam avritya tu tamha pramade sanjatyutta. The modes of goodness drives one to happiness, passion to action. O Bharata, while ignorance, veiling knowledge, attaches one to heedlessness. Comment. A striver is attached to happiness and thus he is bound. Because of this attachment, he does not make any further spiritual progress and transcend the three gunas. As a child takes pleasure in moving its arms and legs, etc., a man feels happy while performing actions. So he is attached to actions and this attachment overpowers him. He pays attention to the Lord's words. You are not entitled to the fruit of action, but he does not pay attention to the fact that he should not be attached to actions. He goes through the Lord's declarations such as, your right is to perform your duty. Let your attachment not be to inaction. And action is said to be the means of the sage who wishes to attain to yoga. So he thinks that he must perform actions. Thus, by performing actions, he is attached to them. So the Lord warns the striver that he should be aware of the attachment to actions which binds him. A striver should discharge his duty promptly by performing actions but should not get attached to them. The mode of ignorance covers a man's discrimination and he can't distinguish between the real and the unreal, the right and the wrong. So he is engaged in idle pursuits but does not discharge his duty promptly. The two characteristics of the modes of goodness are knowledge, discrimination, and illumination, light. The mode of ignorance by covering discrimination misleads a man to heedlessness, and by covering light, purity of senses and mind, misleads him to indolence and sleep, so he can't know the reality. In the next verse, the Lord describes how these gunas, modes, act one over the other. Verse 10. Rajastamscha sattvam bhavati bharta rajha sattvam tamascheva tamha sattvam rajastatha. Goodness prevails, overpowering passion and ignorance. O Bharata, passion prevails, overpowering goodness and ignorance, and even so, ignorance prevails, overpowering goodness and passion. Comment. Goodness prevails, overpowering passion and ignorance. This mode develops illumination, purity, dispassion, generosity, and detachment, etc. Overpowering Rajaguna, namely greed, activity, disquietude, and craving for worldly pleasures and prosperity, etc. And Tamaguna, namely heedlessness, indolence, unnecessary sleep, and delusion, etc. Passion prevails, overpowering goodness and ignorance, namely greed, activity, disquietude, and craving for worldly pleasures, and prosperity prevails over the propensities of Tamaguna and the quality of Sattva. The mode of ignorance, namely heedlessness, indolence, excessive sleep, and delusion, etc., overpower the traits of Sattvaguna and Rajoguna. One of the modes prevails, overpowering the other two modes, and it binds a man. The Lord explains that those who have renounced their connection with Prakriti are not born at the time of creation, nor are they tormented at the time of dissolution. But those who are connected with Prakriti get bound. Now the question arises how they bind a man and what they do before binding the spirit. In response to it, the Lord explained that they drive a man to happiness, to actions, and to heedlessness. Again, the question arises how they drive him. So the Lord answers that one of them prevails over the other two. Thus the order is justified. When one of the modes prevails over the other two, what are the marks of that prepondering mode? The Lord first delineates the marks of the predominance of the mode of goodness. Verse 11. सर्वद्वारेषु देहे अस्मिन् प्रकाशा उपजायते ज्ञानं यदा तदा विद्याद् विवृद्धं सत्वम् इत्युक्ता. When the gates of the body, senses and mind are illumined by light, purity and knowledge, then it may be known that sattva, goodness, is predominant. Comment. When the mode of goodness prevails, overpowering the modes of passion and ignorance, all the senses and the mind are illuminated. As in the light of the sun, the objects are seen clearly. One perceives things in the right perspective. The mind thinks properly. When the senses and mind are cleansed, one can distinguish between the real and the unreal, the right and the wrong, the good and the bad, and what ought to be done and what ought not to be done. When a striver's mind is illumined and discrimination is aroused, he should know that the mode of goodness has prevailed, overpowering the modes of passion and ignorance. So he should not feel proud of his achievement regarding the discrimination and illumination as his own. He should regard them as the marks of the mode of goodness. These modes undergo modifications, but he is the onlooker who observes all the modifications. If he himself had undergone changes, who might have observed the modifications? With the predominance of the mode of goodness, the senses and the mind become cleansed. Discrimination is aroused. Dispassion takes the place of attachment. Quietude displaces disquietude, and generosity displaces greed. All actions are performed as duty without the desire for their fruit. The person possessing this mode does not attach importance to worldly pleasures and prosperity, but only makes both ends meet. With the development of intellect and discrimination, all the actions are performed very carefully and promptly, and he can distinguish between the right and the wrong. So when there is the predominance of the mode of goodness, a striver should be particularly engaged in adoration and meditation, etc., because even a little spiritual practice of that time is very useful. In the next verse, the Lord describes the marks when there is an increase in the mode of passion. Verse 12. Lobha pravrittir arambha karmanam shamha spriha rajasya tani jayante vivriddhe bharatarishbha. Greed, activity, undertaking of actions with an interested motive, unrest and craving. These spring up, O best of the Bharatas, when there is an increase in the mode of passion. Comment. Greed is the lust for multiplying wealth and possessions, but if the wealth increases through one's own profession, though one has no craving, it is not greed. The urge to undertake various forms of activities is pravritti. The activity free from attachment and aversion is not harmful, because even the great souls who have transcended the three modes of nature are engaged in activity. But it is harmful if it is performed with attachment and a desire for its fruit. These actions are undertaken in order to gain wealth, name, fame, and praise, etc. Performance of new actions for worldly pleasures and prosperity is the undertaking of actions, namely arambha, while one's profession or an activity according to circumstances or need of the hour is a pravritti. The goal of human life is not worldly pleasure or prosperity, but God realization. So, in the disciplines of devotion and knowledge, emphasis has been laid on giving up all initiative for action. In the discipline of action, actions are performed without desires and self-centered projections. Without actions, the striver following the discipline of action can't attain equanimity. So a striver should be engaged in actions according to the circumstances available without having any attachment. By doing so, his urge for actions comes to an end. Thus, the undertaking of actions turns into activity. Unrest or commotion in the mind is called asama. Unfulfilled desires cause unrest. If desires are renounced, there is no restlessness. Desire for the bare necessities of life is spriha. A striver should renounce this desire because nothing can be gained merely by desire. It is not an evil to be aware of hunger, thirst, and cold, but desire for getting food, water, and cloth is an evil. When there is an increase in the mode of passion, a striver should think that his life is running smoothly. Then the desire for more is mere stupidity. By thinking so, he should do away with this mode and become indifferent to it. In the next verse, the Lord describes the symptoms when there is an increase in the mode of ignorance. Verse 13. Aprakasho pravrittascha pramado moha eva cha tamasya tani jayante vivriddhe kuru nandana. O son of Kuru, when there is an increase in the mode of ignorance, unillumination, inactivity, heedlessness, negligence, and delusion are manifested. Comment. When the mode of ignorance prevails, overpowering the mode of goodness, the senses and mind are not pure and discrimination disappears. This is in contrast with Prakasha. When the mode of ignorance prevails, overpowering the mode of passion, a person has no inclination to discharge even his obligatory duties. He wants to remain idle. It means neglect of duties which are conducive to the mundane as well as the spiritual progress, and addiction to idle pursuits such as smoking, playing cards, etc., and going to the movies, etc. When there is an increase in the mode of ignorance, delusion is aroused and discrimination is obscured, and a man makes no endeavor to perform his duties to make material and spiritual progress. Excessive sleep and waste of time and money, etc., are the symptoms of an increase in the mode of ignorance. When there are non-illumination, indiscrimination, and inactivity, etc., it means that the mode of ignorance has prevailed, overpowering the modes of goodness and passion. The three modes of goodness, of passion, and of ignorance, being subtle, are beyond the access of the senses and the mind. So, they are not clearly perceived. They can be perceived by their marks or symptoms. A vital fact. A striver observes that the three modes of goodness, of passion, and of ignorance are born. They perish and they undergo modifications while he himself remains the same. The marks of the three modes are perceived while he himself is the onlooker. So he is different from them. But by assuming his identification with them, he assumes the flaws such as lust and anger, etc., in him. This is an invitation to these flaws. While he becomes angry, he justifies his anger by thinking that everybody gets angry. At other times, he regards himself as man possessed with anger even when he is not angry. Thus, this anger gets rooted in his ego and it becomes difficult for him to get rid of it. Actually, these flaws don't abide in him because he is permanent and flawless, while these flaws stay in the mind and intellect temporarily because they appear and disappear. So, a striver without identifying himself with the mind and intellect should have a firm faith that there are no flaws in him. By doing so, the flaws such as anger, etc., totally perish gradually. A striver should not be attached to the happiness born of the modes of goodness because this sort of attachment is a mark of the mode of passion. From attachment springs up desire and from desire ensues anger. Delusion arises from anger. This delusion misleads a person from the mode of passion to the mode of ignorance and he has a fall. In the next two verses, the Lord points out the destiny which awaits a man who dies during the predominance of one of the modes of nature. Verse 14. यदा सत्त्वे प्रवृद्धे तु प्रलयं याति देहभृत् तदोत्तमा विदां लोकान् अम्लान प्रतिपद्यते. When a man dies during the predominance of sattva, goodness, he attains to the pure worlds of those who know the highest. Comment. A man may be naturally established in any one of the three gunas, sattva, rajas or tamas. Sattva guna in its nature is immaculate. He who dies during the predominance of the sattva, he attains to the pure worlds of those who know the highest. The person who dies in the mode of goodness, which may be the temporary phase of his life, is elevated to the worlds where great sages and saints live. It means that the good traits born of the modes of nature are as good as are the pious actions. From this view, there is greater importance of the feelings in the actions than the actions themselves, which are sanctioned by the scriptures. Therefore, the mode of goodness occupies a very high place. Out of the objects, actions, modes, and aim, actions are superior to objects. Modes are superior to actions, and the aim is superior to the modes. The mode of goodness is more subtle and widespread than the modes of passion and ignorance. In the world also, the diet of the subtle beings is less than the gross ones, as the gods, being subtle, are satisfied only with the smell. But as far as the power is concerned, the power of the subtle is more than the gross. So the persons having predominance of the subtle mode of goodness attain to the higher world. Now a doubt arises how a person who dies during the predominance of the sattva, which may be the temporary phase of his life, attains to the higher worlds, which are attained by those who perform virtuous actions throughout their life. The clarification is that there is a special concession from the Lord at the time of death, that thinking of whatever object one leaves the body, that and that alone he attains. So a person dying during the predominance of the mode of goodness attains to the higher pure worlds. There is no doubt about it. Verse 15. Rajasi parlayam gatva karma sangishu jayate tatha palinastamasi Muda yonishu chaite. When one dies in the mode of passion, he is born among those attached to action. And when he dies in the mode of ignorance, he is born in the wombs of the deluded. Comment. When a person dies during the predominance of the mode of passion, when propensities such as greed, activity, unrest, and craving, etc. increase, he is born among those human beings who are attached to action. He whose conduct has been good throughout his life and who has performed good actions, if he dies when the mode of passion is predominant, is born as a human being with good conduct and emotions and performs good actions. If a person possessing no virtues dies when there is predominance of the mode of passion with propensities such as greed, etc., he is born as a man who is attached to objects, persons, and actions, etc. He who dies during the predominance of the mode of passion and whose life has been full of evil propensities such as greed and anger, etc., is born as a human being possessing the demoniac traits. It means that even as human beings, they are born of three kinds according to the traits of the previous life, but all of them possess discrimination bestowed upon them by the Lord. By attaching importance to this discrimination, every human being, through spiritual practice, good company, and study of the scriptures, etc., can realize God because they are eligible for God realization. The person who dies during the predominance of the mode of ignorance, when there is an increase in propensities such as negligence, delusion, and unillumination, etc., He is born in the wombs of the deluded, senseless creatures such as beasts, birds, moths, insects, trees, and creepers, etc. Out of those deluded ones, trees and creepers, etc., are more deluded than birds and beasts, etc. If a person performs good actions but at the time of death has the predominance of the mode of ignorance and is born in the womb of the deluded one, there also he maintains his virtues, good conduct, and nature. As the sage named Bharata died during the predominance of the mode of ignorance by thinking of the deer to whom he was too much attached, and so he was born as a deer. But because of the renunciation and penance of his previous human birth, he did not live with his mother, and instead of eating green leaves, he ate dry leaves. He possessed so much of carefulness during his life as a deer as is rarely possessed even by human beings. Why does the predominance of the three modes at the time of death yield different results? The answer comes. Verse 16. Karmanaha sukritasya sattvikam nirmalam phalam rajastu phalam dukkham ajnanam tamsaha phalam. The fruit of good actions is said to be sattvika and pure. The fruit of rajasa is pain, while the fruit of tamasa is ignorance. Comment. Sattva guna is pure and flawless. The action performed by sattvika doer is also sattvika because the doer is reflected in his activity and the fruit of that action is also pure and pleasant. So long as a doer has his connection with the sattva guna, even though he has no desire for the fruit of action, he is said to be the sattvika doer and his actions bear fruit. But when his connection with the mode is renounced, he is no more called the sattvika doer and his actions bear no fruit, they turn into inaction. Rajaguna is full of attachment. The actions performed by a rajasika doer are rajasika and so is their fruit. It means that rajasika actions are performed with the view of getting pleasures, comforts, luxuries, respect and praise, etc. here and hereafter. But these pleasures born of contacts with objects are verily sources of pain, sorrow. They mislead to the cycle of birth and death. So the Lord has declared the fruit of Rajasa action pain. Rajaguna gives birth to sin and pain. A person possessing the mode of passion performs sinful actions which bear painful fruit. It is craving born of the mode of passion which impels a man to commit sin. Tamaguna is full of delusion. The actions by a tamasika person are performed without thinking of their fruit in the form of violence and loss, etc., out of delusion. So, such a person is reborn after death in the species of stupid creatures such as beasts, birds, moths, insects, trees, and creepers, etc. This verse can be summed up. The Sattvika person in all the circumstances is happy. The Rajasika one is sad, while the Tamasika one is ignorant, having no discrimination. So long as a person is attached to actions and the modes of nature, he can't be happy because the actions bear different kinds of fruit in the form of modes and circumstances. But when he renounces his attachment to actions and modes, he can't be sad and bound. The thought at the time of death is the root of a being's rebirth. The predominance of any one of the modes is the root of that thought. The predominance of a mode depends upon actions. It means that a person performs actions according to the modes and those actions strengthen the mode and he thinks at the time of death according to that mode of nature. Thus, the thought of the last moment, mode of nature and actions are responsible for a person's rebirth in good and bad species. Now, in the next verse, the Lord explains how the gunas activate their respective actions. Verse 17. Sattvat sanjayate jnanam rajso lobha eva cha parmada mohaotamso bhavato jnanam eva cha. From sattva, the mode of goodness, arises knowledge. From rajasa, the mode of passion, arises greed, and from tamasa, the mode of ignorance, arise heedlessness, delusion, and ignorance. Comment. Sattva awakens knowledge or discrimination. That discrimination enables a man to perform only the good actions which bear sattvika and pure fruit. Rajaguna gives birth to greed, etc. The actions of a greedy person bear painful fruit. Greed is the lust for multiplying possessions. Greed can manifest itself in two forms: not to incur proper expenditure and to accumulate wealth, etc. by foul means. If a person does not spend money according to the need of the moment because of greed, he loses peace of mind. If he accumulates and hoards money by foul means, he incurs sins which mislead him to hells and 84 lakh forms of lives which are full of afflictions. Heedlessness, delusion, and ignorance arise from tamasa. A tamasika person thinks the wrong to be right and regards all things contrary. The person whose aim is God realization, not mundane pleasures and prosperity, does not remain established in prakriti, matter, nature. So, he is not controlled by the modes of nature. Through spiritual practice, when his egoism changes and he has a firm resolve to attain his aim, he realizes the self which transcends the three modes. This is called wisdom, knowledge of the self. Now, in the next verse, the Lord explains the different destinies awaiting those who are established in the three gunas, modes of nature. Verse 18. Urdhvam gachanti sattvastha madhyaye tishthanti rajasaha jaghanya guna vrittistha adho gachanti tamsaha. Those who are established in the mode of goodness rise upwards. Those in the mode of passion remain in the middle, and those in the mode of ignorance sink downwards. Sattvika, who are established in the mode of goodness, are those who have the predominance of the mode of goodness and who, because of that mode, observe self-control and fast, offer charity, and perform virtuous actions such as running of cow pens and water huts, construction of roads, plantation of trees, and supply of food free of cost, etc. Such type of people, after giving up the physical body, go upwards to the regions higher than the earth, namely heaven, etc. Those persons who go to the higher regions have predominance of the fire element. Rajasa, who are established in the mode of passion, are those who have predominance of passion and attachment and who are engaged in pleasures and prosperity without going against the ordinance of the scriptures. Such type of persons are reborn on the earth as human beings in whom there is predominance of the earth element. The persons having predominance of the mode of ignorance, being overpowered by heedlessness, indolence, and sleep, waste their time and money on trifles and futile pursuits. They don't discharge their duties sincerely. They think ill of others and they perform evil actions such as theft, robbery, and fraud, etc. Such type of persons die in the predominance of tamaguna, go downwards and degrade themselves. They go downwards in two ways: lower births and lower regions. They are either reborn in lower species such as bees, birds, moths, insects, snakes, scorpions, and evil spirits, etc., or they undergo terrible suffering and tortures in the infernal regions known as Vetarani, Asipatra, Lalabhaksha, Kumbhipaka, Rorava, and Maharorava, etc. Those who, in spite of having the modes of goodness and passion in their life, died during the predominance of the mode of ignorance, take birth in the womb of the deluded. while those who have the predominance of the mode of ignorance throughout their life after death fall into a foul hell. It means that a person takes rebirth according to the thought of the last moment, but he gets pleasures or pains in that life according to the actions performed in the previous birth. For example, if a man has performed good actions in his life, but if at the last moment he thinks of a dog, he will be reborn as a dog, but he will get comforts and luxuries. On the other hand, if a person has performed evil actions, but if he thinks of a man at the time of death, he will take rebirth as a man, but he will be deprived even of the bare necessities of life and will ever suffer from disease. In order to develop the mode of goodness, a striver should study the scripture, keep company of noble persons, reside in holy places of pilgrimages, devote mornings and evenings, the most suited time to devotion and meditation, and discharge his duty according to his caste, creed, stage of life, and the ordinance of the scriptures. He should meditate on God and chant the Sattvika sacred formulas. In Srimad Bhagavata, there are 10 factors which are responsible to develop the gunas, modes. They are scriptures, water, diet, subjects, company, place, time, actions, birth, sacred formula, mantra, and past influences, sanskara. They develop sattvika, rajasika, and tamasika gunas according to their own nature. Om Tat Sat. All glories to Sri Partha Sarthi, Lord Shri Krishna. All glories to Bhagavad Vani, Srimad Bhagavad Geeta. Sri Hari Arpanamastu.